Welcome to this section in Learning ElasticSearch 6 entitled Secure Log Analysis. In this section, we start by going through the steps necessary to prepare for secure log analysis. Next, we dive into the specifics by first setting up secure authentication on ElasticSearch, Kibana, and Logstash with XPath. Afterwards, we work through configuring the Logstash pipeline in the logstash.conf and filebeat.yml configuration files. And we conclude by running an end-to-end secure log analysis. Prep for log analysis. A Logstash pipeline involves a series of steps where log data is moved from source server through Logstash and ending up in an Elasticsearch index. In Learning ElasticSearch 5.0, we did a complete end-to-end walkthrough for log analysis. That, however, was done without authentication. Authentication, if all the proper steps aren't taken, can be a real challenge in ElasticSearch. As such, it's my goal to walk you through all the dirty details so that doing secure log analysis is totally turnkey. To begin with, the initial steps to preparing for authentication involves obviously installing ElasticSearch, Kibana, Logstash, and Filebeat, after which we need to install XPath on ElasticSearch, Kibana, and Logstash. We've seen this before, but in the interest of clarity, we'll quickly walk through this process again. Once XPath is on, we'll return to ElasticSearch and set up our password authentication for ElasticSearch, Kibana, and Logstash. Quickly looking at installing XPath. Here is a recap of all the commands for each service. Note that all services must be stopped before installation. To install XPath on ElasticSearch, here's the command for Kibana, and the command for Logstash. And again, we'll walk through these during our demonstration phase. Setting up passwords for all services can be done in different ways. In our implementation, we'll first start with ElasticSearch. Then we open another command line window and we'll go to the ElasticSearch root directory, obviously for the active cluster that we're using. Once we're in the root directory of ElasticSearch, we'll run this command. As you can see here, we use interactive. You can also replace interactive with auto. If you do this, ElasticSearch will auto-generate passwords for each service, which you will need to write down for future use. Finally, after running interactive, you're prompted to enter and confirm a password for each service. That's ElasticSearch, Kibana, and Logstash. Upon completion of password setup, you will then need to update the two configuration files. The first one will be the Kibana YML configuration file. You would have to add these credentials. The next configuration file is the logstash.yml file, and you would have to add these credentials. Again, if you notice, the password here will be the password that you created when you went through ElasticSearch and set up the passwords using the interactive command. Note that each one of these YML files are located in the root directory of their respective service under the config subdirectory. So Kibana.yml is, for example, located in the Kibana root directory within the config subdirectory. Now we move to building a pipeline. These steps necessarily include, first off, updating the filebeat.yml file, which is located in the Filebeat root directory, and the logstash.conf file, which you will create and save in the Logstash root directory. Note that for the sake of simplicity, we use the name logstash.conf, that is .conf, but this file can be named anything you like, so long as it has the .conf extension. This is important because you could have more than one pipeline configuration file. Looking at Filebeat, we have the following required steps for configuration. Within a configuration file, you need to first set the prospector configuration to true. Next, put the absolute path to the files in the path location. Then you must comment out ElasticSearch, the ElasticSearch location that is, because we won't be using that information. Instead, we will need to uncomment the Logstash location information because we'll be using Logstash. Finally, you need to save the filebeat.yml file, and then from command line, use the sudo chown root command to grant root access to the filebeat.yml file. Again, we're going to walk through this during the demonstration part of our future video. Before configuring your Logstash pipeline, you need to set up roles and a Logstash user, because you don't want to use your super user Elastic in Logstash pipelines. Now, why wouldn't you want to do that? Well, the super user has access to everything on the cluster, and you might not have, and you most likely won't have, top-end administrators running all your Logstash pipelines. So you don't want to grant the person who's responsible for that full-on access to everything. As such, you need to set up a Logstash reader and Logstash writer roles. And once the roles are set up, we assign them to a user named Logstash_internal. This is the user we will authenticate in our Logstash pipeline. Moving to creating the pipeline configuration. We first, as previously stated, need to create the .conf file and save it to our Logstash root directory. Next, we need to add the input, filter, and output data. And finally, we save the results. Again, in the implementation phase, or the demonstration phase, we will see exactly what the input, filter, and output information looks like. In closing everything out, we simply need to run our pipeline. This starts by first confirming the location of your log data in your actual directory structure and in the filebeat.yml file. Make sure everything matches. Next, we start ElasticSearch, Kibana, and Filebeat. We then start the Logstash pipeline. And finally, we check out Filebeat console to observe documents being added to ElasticSearch. And that concludes this video.